Welcome to Toxic Family Stories.
The church smelled of lilies, too sweet, suffocating. Black fabric rustled as people shifted in pews, murmurs rising like static. I stared at the casket, my breath shallow, my hands folded so tight my knuckles ached. The priest's words droned, but they slid past me like water. My husband was dead, the man I thought I knew was gone. And in that raw hollow, when silence pressed against my chest, my sister leaned close, her perfume sharp. "He loaned me money," Rachel whispered, eyes dry, voice smooth. "Now that you're taken care of, we should settle." My grief fractured. I said nothing. My name is Vivian Carter, and that silence became my weapon. After the funeral, the house looked like it had been dressed for guests, and then abandoned. Teacups still warm, almond cookies untouched on porcelain. I walked from room to room touching things, as if objects might confirm I hadn't dreamed it. The wedding photo in the hall caught me worst. His smile looked staged now, like a man playing husband instead of being one. Do you know that feeling? When something you've loved suddenly looks counterfeit, like paint peeling under your fingertips? That's what it was. Rachel showed up again that evening. She poured herself wine from my cabinet, silk pajamas rustling, as though my grief was just background noise for her evening ritual. "Thomas was always so generous," she said, swirling her glass. "You know, he told me once I was the only one who understood him." The words landed like pins pushed into my skin. I didn't argue. Not yet. Instead, I followed the silence deeper into the house. That's when I saw his keys on the hallway table. Familiar brass, silver, and one odd one, darker, shaped differently. The garage key. The one I had once asked about years ago, and he'd smiled and said, "Nothing interesting there, just tools. You wouldn't like it." I'd believed him. I always did. But now he was dead, and what was I protecting anymore? That night I couldn't sleep. The bed was too wide, the air too still. I thought about Rachel's words, about her tone, about how her eyes had not carried grief but calculation, and I thought about Thomas. Calm, punctual, flowers every Sunday, his shirts always pressed, his smile always ready. How easy it had been to think of him as my anchor, and how fragile anchors are when they were never really sunk deep. By morning, I had decided. I took the key. The industrial district was the kind of place you drive past quickly, never stop. Crumbling buildings with rusted roofs, weeds curling through cracked asphalt. His garage was there. A dull metal door with chipped paint. My heart hammered as I slid the key in. It turned with a groan, reluctant, like the door itself wanted to keep its secrets. Inside smelled of oil and dust. For a moment, I thought maybe it really was just tools. Then the lights flickered on overhead, and the world tilted. The walls were covered. Photos pinned in careful rows, maps strung with red thread, documents stacked high. And there he was, Thomas, in dozens of pictures. But not my Thomas. No pressed shirts, no polished shoes, worn jeans, casual smiles, softer eyes. In almost every photo, he stood beside a woman, younger than me, dark hair, intelligent eyes. Isabel. Her name was scrawled on the back of one photo. And sometimes a young man was with them. Logan. I felt the floor shift under me. My knees bent until I gripped the edge of a desk to hold myself upright. My husband of 15 years had built another life, not in whispers or chance affairs, but in full color, framed and preserved like a shrine. Papers covered the desk, bank transfers, corporate records, overseas letters, and one file that turned my breath shallow. Crescent Heart Institute. Diagnosis: ischemic heart disease. Stage 3. Risk of cardiac arrest. He had known he was dying. And instead of preparing me, instead of confiding in me, instead of letting me love him through it, he spent his last years here, with them. Something inside me splintered then. Not with tears, with silence. A silence so heavy it pressed against my lungs, my ribs, my throat. Do you know that kind? The silence that doesn't just fill a room but becomes the room? I staggered back, papers slipping from my hands. And that's when I heard it. Footsteps. Soft, hesitant, careful. I turned, pulse slamming in my ears, and there, standing in the open doorway, was the young man from the photographs. Strong jaw, eyes sharp but uncertain. "Vivian Carter?" he asked. His voice steady, deliberate. I couldn't speak. "I thought you might come," he said, stepping inside. He didn't rush, didn't loom, just moved as if the air between us was fragile. "I'm Logan Myers. Thomas Carter was my father." The room spun. My hands gripped the desk, knuckles white. I stared at him, searching his face, looking for Thomas in the lines of his jaw, the weight in his eyes. It was there. No denying it. "You're really his son," I whispered finally. "Yes," he said, no hesitation, "and I'm sorry. I never wanted you to find out this way." My mouth opened, but words caught in my throat. Everything I thought I knew had cracked open. He stepped closer, cautious. "There are things you should see, things he left behind. I don't think he meant for it all to fall on you alone." I wanted to scream, to throw the papers at him, to deny it all, but instead I stayed silent, because silence was the only thing left I could trust. He looked at me with my husband's eyes, but not the eyes that stared across our dinner table for years. These were sharper, younger, untamed. "He gave me this 2 weeks before he died," Logan said, reaching into his backpack. His hands were steady, too steady for someone who had just shattered the ground I stood on. He unfolded a creased sheet of paper, edges yellowed from being handled. "It's a draft of a will, not official, but it names me. It names you, and it mentions something else." I hesitated before taking it. My fingers shook as they brushed the familiar loops of Thomas's handwriting. My name. Logan's name. A company called Mercury South Holdings I'd never heard of. And at the bottom, one line that made my throat close. "Access to remaining documents secured in office vault. Code linked to personal item gifted to V." The necklace. The sapphire necklace he'd given me 2 nights before his heart gave out. He'd pressed it into my hands, kissed my cheek, and said, "You're the only one for me." I had believed him. I had worn it the night he died. Now it wasn't jewelry. It was a key. Logan's eyes followed my silence. "I don't want to take anything from you," he said. His voice was low, careful. "But if you don't look, someone else will, and they won't ask nicely." I should have thrown him out. I should have screamed. Instead, I found myself whispering, "Why now? Why come to me?" "Because you're part of it," he said. "He wanted you to be safe, and I need to know what else he hid." The weight of it pressed into me like wet sand. Part of me wanted to slam the garage door, leave him there, and never come back. But another part, the part Rachel had poked and prodded with her smug smile, knew I couldn't ignore this. Not anymore. I nodded, once. That evening, I sat in Claire's living room, the necklace between us on the coffee table. Claire's hand hovered above mine. "You don't have to do this," she said softly. "Don't I?" My voice cracked. "If I don't, Rachel will. Or worse, those men Logan mentioned. Gordon, Crane, whoever they are." Claire leaned back, studying me with that sharp kindness only she could carry. "Then we don't let you walk into it alone." The next morning, Logan drove us downtown. Claire insisted on coming, tossing her coat over her arm like armor. The office tower loomed glassy and impersonal, the kind of place I had passed 100 times and never thought to question. Thomas had always said it was a satellite space, somewhere he could work quietly. He had never invited me inside. The receptionist barely glanced at us as Logan swiped a key card. "I'm listed as a co-owner," he murmured, jaw tight. "Another secret he didn't tell you." The elevator ride stretched like years. My breath caught as the doors opened on the 14th floor. The office smelled faintly of cologne, not his usual scent, something harsher. Everything was gray and sleek, metal desk, leather chairs, no photographs, no warmth, no trace of me. Logan walked to the abstract painting mounted behind the desk and gestured. "The safe's there." My fingers found the clasp of the necklace. For a moment I hesitated. Do you know that feeling when your body knows the next step will change everything, and it begs you to stop? That was me. But I twisted the clasp anyway. Click. The pendant opened, revealing a hidden metal plate. Logan slid it into the keypad, a low beep. The painting swung open, and the safe door clicked. Inside lay stacks of documents, a flash drive, a small wooden box, and a silver key attached to a tag. Federal Trust Bank, safe deposit. I picked up the wooden box first. It was lighter than I expected. My fingers lifted the lid. A ring, simple gold with a small diamond. Inside the band, engraved, N, always. N. My breath stuttered. Isabel. The world narrowed. My husband had bought her a ring, promised her eternity, while I sat at home folding laundry and making dinners at 7. My knees buckled and Claire's hand caught my arm before I hit the chair. "Jesus," she whispered, staring at the inscription. Logan looked away, jaw clenched, grief shadowing his face. I couldn't cry. Not then. I couldn't even breathe properly. I just felt the silence harden inside me. Among the documents was a folded letter with my name on the front. Thomas's handwriting, steady and familiar. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Vivian, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I never had the courage to tell you the truth. I built 2 lives. I was selfish. I loved you in the only way I knew how. I left you the truth. Burn it, bury it, or use it. It's your choice now. Forgive me if you can. The words blurred. Claire took it gently, read it, then handed it back. Logan didn't ask to see it. We stood in silence, the kind that isn't peaceful but hollow. When we finally left, I clutched the necklace like a blade in my palm. Back at Claire's, she poured tea I couldn't drink. "What now?" she asked. "I don't know," I whispered. "But Rachel isn't finished. She's circling like a vulture." I didn't go home that night. I couldn't bear the empty house, the staged perfection. I stayed on Claire's couch, the necklace and the ring beside me on the table, and maybe I should have expected it. The call that came just after midnight. Unknown number, voice smooth as glass. "Mrs. Carter, this is Gordon Blake. I was a business associate of your husband's. I believe you have something of mine." My stomach turned. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do," he said. Calm, patient. "The documents, some of them involve me. Let's not make this harder than it needs to be." "I'm not meeting you," I said. "You will," he replied, "because the other people Thomas worked with, they don't ask. They take." Then he hung up. I stared at the ceiling, my heart racing so loud it drowned out the night. When I told Logan the next morning, his jaw locked. "He called me too," he admitted, "but it wasn't just him. Someone else. Victor Crane. He says the money was his originally. If we don't hand everything over, he'll come for it." Claire sat between us, her face pale but steady. "Then we get ahead of them. Whatever Thomas left, we use it." The silver bank key lay on the table, cold and waiting. That was when I realized the silence I carried wasn't just grief. It was strategy. Because the more they pressed, the quieter I became. And the quieter I became, the more they revealed themselves. The Federal Trust Building didn't look like a place where lives could split apart. From the street, it was plain, tucked between a law office and a historic inn, almost invisible. But inside, past the polished floors and muted voices, was the silver key Thomas had left behind. Logan walked beside me, shoulders squared, silent. Claire hovered close, her arm brushing mine now and then like she was reminding me I wasn't alone. My throat was dry. I thought of Rachel's smirk, Gordon's smooth threat, Crane's shadow pressing in. Every step down that marble corridor felt heavier. The vault manager studied the key, his brow raised. "Been years since this box was touched," he said. His voice was flat, but I caught the flicker of curiosity in his eyes. He led us down through steel doors and thick air until the silence itself seemed to vibrate. He handed me gloves, standard procedure. The lock turned cleanly. I pulled the box out, my hands trembling though I tried to keep them steady. Inside was no money, no passports, no weapons, just a thick manila folder and a photograph. The photo stopped me cold. Thomas, Logan, Gordon Blake, and Victor Crane. Standing in front of a black SUV, arms crossed, laughing. Behind them, shadows of men I didn't know, but the message was clear. They weren't just associates. They were a team. Logan cursed under his breath. He told me he kept us separate. He made me think he was protecting us. But this... His voice broke off. I opened the folder. Documents slipped against each other, signatures scrawled in ink, company registrations in countries I had to squint to recognize, shell firms, payoffs, records of transfers. One document had a title stamped in red, Crane Blackmail Insurance. I whispered it aloud. Insurance. It was leverage, a loaded gun in paper form. He had kept proof of everything, not just their crimes, his too. I sat on the cold bench, the folder heavy in my lap. For a moment I thought I might faint. Do you know that sensation when the ground feels less like ground and more like air you're about to fall through? That's what it was. Claire crouched beside me. He didn't just betray you, Vive. He made you custodian of his mess. I nodded, throat tight. And maybe it was grief, maybe rage, but in that moment I realized something. He hadn't left me with love, but with power. And power was something Rachel, Gordon, and Crane more than anything. We copied everything with Marcus Doyle that same afternoon. His office smelled of leather and old paper, comfortingly dull compared to the adrenaline that still pulsed in my veins. Marcus's jaw set tighter with every page he scanned. These names, he muttered, they're not just businessmen, international banks. You're holding dynamite. Then we don't let go of it, I said. My voice surprised me. steady, sharper than before. He looked at me carefully. "Do you want to press charges?" "No," I said. "I want insurance." So we split it. One copy in Marcus's locked drawer, one with Claire, one with me. 3 lives carrying the weight of one man's double dealing. I should have felt relief. Instead, the silence gnawed at me worse than ever. That night, Logan mentioned Edward Holloway. We were still at Claire's, lights dim, the necklace and ring glinting on the table like witnesses. Logan's voice was low. My mother kept his name in a box of contacts. She said he was the only one who ever told my father the truth. If anyone has answers, it's him. "Where?" I asked. "Savannah," Logan said. So we drove. Rain trailed down the windshield like veins, the sky low and gray. None of us spoke much. What was there to say? Every mile south felt like peeling another layer off a wound I hadn't wanted to see. Edward's house rose from ivy and brick, stately, quiet. He opened the door before we knocked. His hair was white, his eyes sharp with age. "You're Vivian," he said, without doubt. "And you must be Logan." "You knew we'd come?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "Thomas told me, if it all fell apart, you'd find me." Inside smelled of pipe smoke and books. Shelves lined the walls. A piano polished but untouched in the corner. He disappeared into another room and returned with a sealed envelope. He left this with me. Said it was only to be opened if you both arrived together. My fingers fumbled at the flap. Inside was a letter, short and stiff, and another will. This one formal, notarized. It named Rachel's unborn child as beneficiary of 25% of Thomas's private savings to be held until adulthood. Rachel herself was given nothing. My blood went cold. Edward's voice was quiet, measured. He trusted the child, not her. I set the paper down, hands shaking. Even from the grave, Thomas was orchestrating, calculating. He had planned for a baby that wasn't even born yet. Claire's voice cracked. "So Rachel's locked out?" "Legally, yes," Edward said. "But she'll fight. You need to be ready." Logan leaned forward, face pale. "And if she tries?" Edward glanced at the folder. "Then you use that. He told me once, the flash drive holds everything, every transfer, every secret. If they push you, you push back." The silence after that was heavy, filled with something new. Not grief, not rage, but strategy. We left Savannah with the second will tucked in my bag, the rain easing as if the sky had spent its grief already. On the drive back, I thought about Rachel, how she had smiled at the funeral, how she had claimed debts and sympathy like prizes, and how she had no idea what Thomas had actually left behind. I couldn't tell if the shiver that ran through me was dread or power. Maybe both. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept seeing Isabel's face in those photos, Logan's eyes, Thomas's ring with N always etched inside. I kept hearing Rachel's voice in my kitchen. "Now that you're taken care of," and I knew one thing with a clarity that sliced through the fog. The next move wasn't theirs. It was mine. The flash drive sat on the table like a live wire. Small, black, unmarked. Nothing about it looked important, yet every breath in the room bent toward it. Logan's fingers drummed against his knee. Claire wrapped her arms around herself as if she were cold. And me? I just stared at it. 2 days passed like that. Me circling it, refusing to plug it in. Not yet, because once I did, I could never go back. Have you ever known the answer to a question would ruin you and still felt your hand twitch to ask it? That's what it was. The not knowing ate me worse than the truth ever could. Finally, I slid it into my laptop. The screen flickered. Thomas appeared. Not the man in our wedding photo. Not the man who pressed flowers into my hands on Sundays. This Thomas looked hollow. Wrinkled shirt, eyes sunken, jaw tight as if he hadn't slept in weeks. "Vivian," he said, voice gravel. "If you're watching this, I didn't make it, or maybe I ran out of time." He rubbed his face, leaned forward. "There's no easy way, so I'll just say it. You were never the one I had to hide things from. You were the one I wanted to protect. But I waited too long." He paused. His eyes met the camera, steady, unblinking. "There's someone you trust more than you should. It's Rachel." The room froze. "She wasn't just someone I slipped with," he continued. "It wasn't that simple. She planned it. The pregnancy wasn't an accident. The night I told her I couldn't keep doing this, she changed. She said if I left, she'd go public. With the money, with the shell accounts, with everything I buried to keep you safe." His voice cracked, and for the first time I saw fear on his face. He swallowed. "I think she killed Isabel." Logan jolted upright. Claire's hand flew to her mouth. I couldn't move. "I can't prove it." Thomas said, shaking his head. But the timing, it was too perfect. Isabel had packed her bags, told me she'd booked a one-way flight to Lisbon. Next day, the car crash. Single vehicle, no witnesses. They said brakes failed, but she had the car serviced the day before. His eyes burned into the camera. Rachel knew she was pregnant. Isabel didn't. That changed everything. He leaned closer, his voice trembling. I tried to make it right. I moved the money, created backups, made sure if something happened to me, you'd have power. I was weak. But you're not. If you want to walk away, do it. If you decide to fight, don't do it alone. The screen went black. No one spoke. The silence was thick, clogged in my throat. Rachel's smirk at the funeral played over in my mind like a broken record, her perfume in my kitchen, her hands on my wine glasses. She killed my mom? Logan's voice cracked, not loud, but guttural. I closed the laptop. My fingers pressed hard against the lid as if I could trap Thomas's words inside. We don't know for sure, I whispered, but even I didn't believe myself. I invited Rachel to brunch. Do you think I was insane? Maybe I was, but sometimes the only way to strip a mask is to let the mask wear itself too long. Claire's porch was dressed in soft light that morning. Neighbors peered through curtains, pretending to water plants, adjusting blinds. Logan stayed inside, his face too raw to risk. Claire set down iced tea and retreated to the kitchen, though I knew she was listening. Rachel arrived in a pale blue dress that hugged her belly. She smiled like a woman sure of her throne. He kicks when I drink orange juice, she said brightly, rubbing her stomach. I smiled back, but my eyes didn't. We sat, the summer air heavy, cicadas buzzing. She folded her hands on her lap, tilting her head just so. I'm glad you reached out, she said smoothly. I was worried you were angry. Why would I be angry? I asked softly. My voice was cool, level. Because my husband was sleeping with my sister, or because he left you part of the inheritance? Her blink was the first crack. Vivian, she said, tone syrup. This is hard for both of us. Thomas was confused, torn, but he loved you. No, I interrupted. He pitied me. Her face stiffened. And he feared you. Her lips pressed tight. I reached into my bag and laid the flash drive between us. It gleamed in the sunlight, small and ordinary, but her eyes widened just slightly. I know, I said. My voice never lifted, never shook. I know about the accounts, the manipulation, Isabel. He told me everything. She didn't move, didn't blink. Finally she hissed, you can't prove anything. You're right, I said calmly, but I don't need to. Her breath caught. She leaned forward, eyes flashing. What are you saying? I stood, the porch boards creaking under my feet. I'm saying I'm not going to court. I'm not fighting you for scraps. I'm walking away, and I'm leaving you with everything you thought you wanted, the money, the child, the lies. She rose too, her voice sharp now. You think that scares me? No, I said, steady as stone. But it will. Her face blanched. For the first time, she looked unsure. Inside, Logan waited in the shadows. Claire stood in the doorway, silent witness. The neighbors' blinds shifted again. Everyone saw. Everyone knew. That afternoon, I drove to Marcus's office. I handed him the flash drive, a signed affidavit, and one instruction. If anything happened to me, it all went public. Every document, every video, every sin. When I left, the sun was dipping low, the sky bruised purple. I walked to my car with my head high, the necklace cool against my skin. I had thought silence was weakness, but now I knew better. Silence was a blade, and I had just put it to Rachel's throat. After I left Marcus's office, I sat in my car for a long time, hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The affidavit was signed. The flash drive no longer mine alone, it was a fuse waiting for a spark. A strange calm settled over me, the kind that comes not from peace but from an inevitability. If Rachel tried to push, if Gordon or Crane circled closer, the truth would cut them all. When I finally drove home, the house was dark. Too dark. I walked through each room, fingertips grazing furniture as if the wood could remember him. The wedding photo on the wall stared back at me with a hollow grin. The sapphire necklace weighed heavy at my collarbone. I realized then it had never been a gift. It had always been a lockpick. In the bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at his side. The dent in the mattress was still there, a ghost of a man who had divided himself between two worlds until he broke. I thought of his letter. Burn it, bury it, or use it. He had handed me the choice, but it wasn't his choice to give any more. The next day, Rachel called. Her voice was syrup, but I could hear the panic just under it. Vivian, she said, too bright. We should talk about family. About the baby. There's nothing to talk about, I told her. She pressed harder, her words sharp even when she tried to sweeten them. You think you can walk away? You think silence makes you stronger? You'll end up alone. Alone. The word cut, but not the way she wanted. Alone was what I had been since the first moment Thomas lied, maybe even before. Alone was safer than standing in rooms where the floor gave way without warning. I already am, I said. Then I hung up. Logan was waiting when I stepped outside. He leaned against his car, arms folded, eyes carrying too much for someone his age. She'll push, he said. I know. Then what do we do? I looked at him, at the shadow of Thomas in his jawline, his stare. But Logan wasn't Thomas. He was the consequence and the continuation all at once. We don't chase her, I said. We let her choke on her own lies. He nodded, but I saw his throat tighten. For him, it wasn't just Rachel. It was his father, his mother, Isabel. Every secret had become his inheritance. That night, I packed one suitcase, just one. Clothes, papers, nothing sentimental. The rest I left where it lay. The house wasn't a home anymore. It was a mausoleum of lies dressed as routine. Before I locked the front door, I walked through one last time. The kitchen, where I'd baked his favorite bread. The living room where he'd brought me Sunday flowers. The crack in the hallway floorboard we had always promised to fix. I touched them all. Not to remember, but to release. When I reached the garage, I closed the metal door and locked it. Not because I was hiding anything, because I wasn't coming back. 1 week later, I boarded a flight to Colorado. The mountains rose like stone guardians, the air thin and sharp, and for the first time in months, my lungs felt clear. I rented a small cottage with peeling paint and a narrow porch. Nothing grand, nothing staged. At night, I listened to silence, not the silence of betrayal, but the silence of a life no one else owned. Claire visited, bringing wine and laughter, reminding me that family could be chosen. Logan called sometimes, his voice tentative, as if still testing whether I would answer. And Rachel? She never stopped circling. Word trickled back through whispers. Her fights with lawyers, her growing desperation, her attempts to claim what Thomas had already taken from her. She thought silence meant weakness. She didn't understand it was a blade and I had already pressed it to her throat. Do you want to know the truth? The hardest part wasn't losing Thomas. It wasn't Rachel's betrayal or even Isabel's ghost. The hardest part was admitting that I had lived half a life, blindfolded by trust, numbed by routine. The grief was real. The love was not. And yet in the end, that gave me something stronger than revenge. It gave me clarity. Because when Rachel knocked at my door months later, belly round, face pale, I didn't slam it in her face. I didn't scream. I didn't even let her in. I just looked at her, really looked, and saw the woman who had tried to build her throne from another's grave. I thought you'd forgive me, she whispered, eyes wet now, but not from sorrow, from fear. I stepped onto the porch, closing the door gently behind me. Forgiveness isn't mine to give, I said. Not anymore. She searched my face for something, some crack, some softness, but I had none left for her. I walked past her, down the steps, into the cool mountain air. My silence said everything. Rachel called after me, but her voice was just an echo against the cliffs. I didn't turn back. My name is Vivian Carter, widow, survivor. Not the woman who was lied to, not the sister who was manipulated, not the wife who believed in Sunday flowers and pressed shirts. I am the woman who learned that silence isn't empty. Silence is full of power. And when I finally closed the cottage door behind me that evening, I knew one thing with a certainty that felt like steel in my veins. The cycle was broken. My journey found its peace for now. But another woman like us is about to face her hardest challenges yet. Together, we will continue and grow. The next story of breaking cycles and reclaiming peace is waiting for you with its own strength and battles.